Introduction to Digital Photography. Bits and Bytes. Learning outcomes. By the end of this section, you will have a much better understanding of the basic units of digital photography. So, let us break these bits and bytes down so you can understand exactly what I mean. A bit is the basic unit on a computer, which can be a 0 or 1, off or on. So bits, or zeros and ones, is the language of the computer. And this is how digital information is received and transmitted in all digital devices, such as computers, smartphones, and of course, digital cameras. So a bit represents two different values, as we've said, 0 or 1. A byte then is 8 bits, 8 zeros or 8 ones. A byte has 8 slots for 2 units. So think of 1 byte as 2 to the 8th power, which, when you calculate it, can represent 256 distinct values. Even a text document that contains only 3 characters will need more than 1 byte of data to represent it. That is why we have kilo, mega, and giga to refer to much larger file sizes. Kilobyte is 1024 bytes. Megabyte is 1024 kilobytes. Gigabyte is 1024 megabytes. Bits are usually for interface speed, and bytes are for internet storage. Generally speaking, uppercase B denotes bytes, and lowercase b represents bits. We use these fundamental values to represent digital photography. Photos are made of millions of tiny pixels that themselves, in computer memory, are represented as those zeros and ones that I've been talking about. Red, green, and blue, also denoted as RGB. We consider colour to be separated into 3 constitutive parts: red, green, and blue. Every pixel that you see has 3 constituent parts, and each of those is made up of 8 bits. When this is combined, it makes up a JPEG format. 24-bit color means that every pixel has 24 bits of color information. Another format you might see is 16-bit TIFF, and this is useful for photographers when we want to get the most quality out of our work. But without complicating it too much, this is essentially just a higher bit rate. In its simplest form, an image is a table of pixels, each of which has 24 bits of information. This is a lot of information, so we need to find a way to compress the picture, especially for our computers when we want to email clients or friends an image, if they want to use it or manipulate it. There are various methods of compression, but there's a problem because very few photos have uniform sections of color. The graphics interchange format, denoted as GIF, uses this approach. And this works well for, let's say, the German or French flag, because they have distinguished lines that separate uniform sections of color. But JPEGs compress things slightly differently, in that it breaks the photo apart into blocks and simplifies each block. Extreme JPEG compression can create big ugly blobs that, although they look uniform within themselves, they don't to the adjacent blocks. And this is a lossy compression format, and it will look very bad because data is being simply thrown away that the computer feels is not important. So, keep JPEG photos, or the original files, safe when editing. Always use Save As, just to keep them separate. RAW files. A camera raw image file contains minimally processed data from the image sensor of either a digital camera, an image scanner, or motion picture film scanner. More and more people are shooting RAW. RAW files do not lose quality, but they are very heavy because they have not been processed yet. RAW files are useful if you want to use image processing software, which we'll look at later, to perform additional work to your photography. JPEG is the most common file format that you will come across in terms of compression. You're going to hear me talk about them a lot throughout this course. GIF files, as we've said, are very basic subsets of colour that lack the information of higher bitrate files. PNG are another common file type, and they are very useful if you want to display transparency in your file. They work very well if you're working with photography in Photoshop, which leads me into the next file type, PSD. These files are recognized as Photoshop working files. TIFF files, again, are useful if we want that higher bitrate in our work. Let us take a moment to recap what we talked about when we looked at pixels. Each pixel typically consists of 8 bits, which is 1 byte for a black and white image. Or then it's 24 bits, which is 3 bytes, for a color image. 1 byte for red, 1 for green, and 1 for blue. Therefore, the bits and bytes are important because they refer to the detail of the pictures you will be capturing in this new digital format. What have we learned in this lesson? We have learned about the fundamental values to represent digital photography. Remember that a bit is the basic unit on a computer, and this can be 0 or 1. We've also learned about how colour is made in these 3 parts: red, green, and blue.